quickly. If I read quickly, I will just have time to finish. I have time today only to say a few words about a topic on which really it is necessary to say many. It is a topic of great importance, for it lays the groundwork for a critique of the way that art has been understood, written about, taught, and put to work. For to be sure, art is deployed for purposes that are against its nature. I cannot say very much about this topic and its ramifications here, but I can at least identify it as an issue of concern. That topic is why Platonism provides a stronger basis for an understanding of the arts than the Aristotelianism that has dominated writing and thinking about the arts since the beginning of the modernist era, and this despite the fact that Ezra Pound was perhaps the most Platonist of poets since the late Renaissance. I will anticipate the conclusion in order to help you form a mental roadmap of where these few brief remarks will take us. I hope to suggest first that the Platonic approach, by refusing to understand the experience of art as one of forming judgments, that is to say, of attributing predicates to delineated, differentiated objects, also avoids the intellect's tendency to turn art into a form of discourse. And second, that the Platonic approach understands art as cultivating a spiritual state, as a transformative experience that suggests a higher way of understanding and not a mere form of entertainment. And on the matter of the connection of this topic to our meeting here today, I point out that George Grant repeatedly attempted to formulate a Platonic account of the beautiful, the true, and the good. But I shall start with Simone Weil, who was for Grant a guide to the manner in which Platonic thought could join with the greatest that the Middle Eastern religious traditions have to offer, and to speak of what it is that makes for a good life. Simone Weil understands that intimations of truth or will, but rather through attention, attente, which is to say through detachment, emptiness, and waiting. In a short essay with a beautiful, intriguing, and pointed title, Reflections on the Right Use of School Studies with a View to the Love of God, Weil noticed the authentic and pure values, truth, beauty, and goodness in the activity of a human being are the result of one and the same act, a certain application of the full attention to the object. Teaching should have no aim but to prepare by training the attention for the possibility of such an act. All the other advantages of instruction are without interest, prayer being only attention in its pure form, and studies being a form of gymnastics of the attention. Each school exercise should be a refraction of spiritual life. There must be a method in it, a certain way of doing a Latin prose, a certain way of tackling a problem in geometry, and not just any way, make up a system of gymnastics of attention calculated to give it a greater aptitude for prayer. Method for understanding images and symbols, etc. Not to try to interpret them, but to look at them till the light suddenly dawns. These are courageous sayings, and I fear their courageousness may be on the point of becoming obscured by the passing of time, and soon enough even the most complacent professors will believe that they, had they been alive in that time, would have endorsed them. Make no mistakes, these statements were at odds with her time and us as much as they are at odds with our own. Susan Sontag was as brilliant as she ordinarily was when she commented in a very early review of Rush Rhys's very early anthology, Selected Essays, that Weil was, quote, excruciatingly identical with her ideas. Sontag was brilliant, but perhaps not quite right, for Weil found her presence in reality, even her conceiving ideas, intolerable. That is what she found excruciating. Quote, when I am in any place, I disturb the silence of heaven and earth by my breathing and the beating of my heart, she writes. Again, we have to be nothing in order to be in our right place in the whole. Perfection is impersonal. Our personality is that part of us which belongs to error and sin. Moral regeneration is what is to be achieved by attente, but it comes only through the excruciating ardors of decreation. Weil's ideas on attente are fundamentally Platonic. She does not highlight that fact, for she, like Grant, strives to renew Platonic thinking for her time by giving it new words, and it is unhelpful to that task to keep citing the sources that she draws on. But these ideas do derive from Plato's comments scattered across his writings on the dialectic. In the seventh letter, Plato, if indeed, as I accept he actually authored it, Plato expounds on the necessity of his version of the dialectic. Plato, most people know, maintained that mathematical knowledge is propedeutic to philosophical knowledge, as mathematical objects are abstract and are apprehended only by the intellect, not by the senses. Many have concluded from this that the forms, ide, are like mathematical objects, and so the knowledge that we seek as a guide to living resembles mathematical knowledge by being certain, definite, and rational. That is quite wrong. In the seventh letter, as in the Symposium, Plato points out that the empirical circle, this instance of a circular sort of being, is negated and turns into its opposite when it is compared to the mathematical object. This most writers accept. But also, what fewer realize, that the mathematical object, the thought of the circle as such, is not pure circularity itself, but only a particular, a temporary representation of the object. It too must be annulled, to overcome its finitude and specificity of aspect. About this particular intellectual representation of a circle, Eric Frank, in a 1940 article with which George Grant was acquainted, notes, "Intellection has presented the soul what it was to the soul what it was not seeking at all, only the thought of the object. Thus every thought is necessarily dialectic. Thus thinking is unable to preserve the transcendent existence as thought. It must annihilate the thought in order to reach to the thing itself." For Plato, therefore, the true philosophical method is this form of dialectic. Every method, every perception, every concept, every thought of a thing is thus again refuted, and in rubbing these phrases of knowing against each other and against the true being of the idea itself, their finitude and untruth become manifest. That was the Frank. Thought knows an idea of a circle that has been brought within thought itself. The transcendent form escapes thought. Thus thought must annihilate itself in order to reach the transcendent form. This occurs, Plato tells us, through first a synagogue, a collection, and through a diaeresis, a separation, which seems to be the negative moment in which is recognized the differences between various idei, various aspects that participate. The term for the relation was mathesis, in an eidos and the eidos itself. To attain that which is utterly transcendent, that which is beyond being, thought must annihilate itself. Here are the origins of the ideas of decreation they and after her grant both embraced. What is attained by this dialectic of conjectures and refutations, finally of negations and annihilations? Every representation must be overcome on the way to wisdom. This implies that wisdom, the ultimate knowledge, has no determinate object. Wisdom, accordingly, is not any form of theoretical knowledge, which always involves some form of representation. Rather, the truth that is ultimately attained is that of the agathon, the good, and the source, which is the source of every other truth and of being. If the truth of the good is not known through representation, thought and representation, how is it apprehended? Plato says by identification. A general principle of Platonic epistemology, and in fact Greek epistemology in general, is that only like can know alike. So the vision of the good is granted only to those who have become good. And since the good is beyond being, the knower must empty himself or herself out and become bona fide. Knowledge of the good is realized in the very existence of the philosopher. Our search for truth, in our search for truth, our being itself, along with every other image, every illusion of truth, is extinguished in the effulgent identification with the good. I'm going to leap ahead. I had more to say, but to return to the implications of this for aesthetics for Grant. The agathon is that through which all that is becomes one. It binds multiplicity into unity. All this would fall apart. Except that would fall into the abyss of non-being, but for the binding of all together in the agathon. Now consider Grant's aesthetics. What has this to... It has to do with the whole, which brings all that is together. It is apprehended not through the intellect, but by love, which opens us toward an illumination by the good. That is to say, it is known not by analysis, but by an understanding of the relation, not by an understanding of the relation between substance and qualities or categories in the relationship of subsumption. It is not known through thought. It is known through love, and love requires distance or otherness, as Grant keeps reminding us. Otherwise, what is known in love would be scrutable. In this, it helps us along the way to living well. In his great essay, Faith in the Multiversity, Grant writes of beauty. The greater the work of art, the less its purpose can be represented at all. The staggered silence with which we can watch King Lear is evidence that something of great importance of great import is before us. When we are enraptured, we can say that it seems purposiveness itself. But can we ever represent that purpose to ourselves? In a certain sense, that purpose of this is nothing but a gathering together of the means employed by the author. In another sense, it is present, but we cannot represent it. The beautiful at its height gives us purposeness, but its good transcends us. Oh, dangerous word. This is inevitably the question. Are there some works that are more worth paying attention to than others? What is given in those that are most worthy of attention? What is it that enraptures us about them, so that even King Lear, Herschel 491, Mozart's Piano Concerto 24, they are enraptured? Can we describe that enrapturing as the immediate engrossment involving love and awe in the beauty of the work, which point toward a good, but is quite unrepresentable? The good and the love are the same, Grant reminds us. This seems to me much closer to a true account of the experience of a real artwork than any other that I know. Thank you.